And I'm flying with 3 children and a wife, yes. So here's an interesting parlor game, if you haven't played it before, to do on New Year's Eve. As you're gathered around your table with family and friends, imagine that you have a time machine, and you can travel forward or backward in time. You can only use it once. And so ask those assembled around the table, which would they choose? Not where necessarily, but which would they choose? Would they choose to go forward in time or to go backward and examine the past? There's no right or wrong answer, except that for each one of us, I think that there is only one answer. One answer that feels maybe more right than the other. But it's still an interesting question, and it supports a theory that I have. That you can divide any group into 2 subgroups. Those that prefer to look towards the unknown future, and those who are guided by a reflection on the past. Yes, it's possible to have a mixture of the two, but ultimately we are all probably just a little bit more of one than we are of the other. So if you really think about it, which one are you more of, or the other? I am a reflect on the past kind of guy. For all of my interest in innovation and technology, I love history. I love the insight of hindsight, to draw lessons from past experiences, positive and negative. By looking backward, I feel that I can see ahead with more clarity. Maybe that is part of why I chose to become a rabbi. We are the people of the book, after all, and our book is in many ways a history book. It responds to the challenges of modernity through the lens of the experiences of the past. And that being the case this time of year, with all of the year in review shows and the end of the year articles and surveys and polls of what was hot and what was not, it's a treat for me that only comes once a year in these final weeks as I get the highlight reel and the low light reel of 2016. You could say that I look forward to looking backward this time every year. My favorite of these year in review articles is still the Time Magazine Person of the Year. Usually around American Thanksgiving, I sit at our family table and I raise the question, who would you pick for the Person of the Year? Aren't you glad you don't have me at your Thanksgiving table? Time machines, Person of the Year surveys, my family humors me a great deal. The criteria for the selection process of the Time Magazine Person of the Year is powerful in its simplicity. It reads, the person or persons who have most affected the events of the past year for better or worse. This year, as it does every 4 years, Time Magazine shows the president-elect. It's hard to argue with the choice. For better or for worse, he certainly had a dramatic and profound impact on the past year. And as much as I have obsessed over this election, and I say that almost as a sermon to myself in the past tense, hoping that I will finally put down all of the things I can't put down from reading, the new president-elect was not the person that affected me the most this past year. I'd like to then make that question a more personal one for all of us. And instead, I want to ask you, who is your person of the year? Who is the person that most affected you, for better or for worse, this past year? Now you have something interesting, a question worth exploring. Indeed, as they say in my line of work, now we have a sermon. Only took me 2 pages to get there. Really 3. Think about it for a moment. Who is the person or persons who most affected your life, for better or for worse, this past year? To answer it, we really have to do our own Person of the Year or Personal Year in Review show. To replay a montage of the personal events of our mind's eye and pick those events that, when strung together, are the most impactful. And when we find the events, we must then look deeper into them and find still the common thread that was present throughout all of them, or at least most of them. And then we have to go deeper still and attach those events to a person or people that made up that thread, personifying that force for change in our life, for better or for worse, and then giving it a name. Just as there are two types of people in the world, those who look backward to the past and those who look forward to the future, there are, I think, four types of people that are candidates for our personal person of the year. They are the anonymous person, the heroic person, the wicked person, and the partner or companion. By my estimation, our personal person of the year will come from one of those four categories of people. And not surprisingly, each has a biblical example that I am about to share with you in 4 paragraphs. Think again about the question. Who is the person or persons who most affected your life, for better or for worse, this past year? Was it someone anonymous, whose name you hardly or never knew, who came out of nowhere and changed your life, changed your year in a profound and lasting way? Like that man that Joseph met, the Ish, the nameless man, in the story of Genesis when Joseph met him as he was looking for his brothers in the field. If you remember the story, it's this nameless man that comes up to Joseph, sees that he's lost, and says, "What are you looking for?" And Joseph says, "I'm looking for my brothers." And he says, "They went that way, towards Dothan." And had it not been for that man, Joseph would not have found his brothers, or they would not have found him, which didn't turn out so great in the beginning as they tried to kill him and sell him into slavery, but ultimately became the redeeming and saving factor in the Jewish people because it brought him to Egypt, which then allowed him to be in a position of power where he could save the people because of the famine that was in the land and his relationship with Pharaoh, that he was in a position to save the Jewish people. And this nameless man was not only Joseph's person of the year, but the Jewish people's person of the year, and in fact, we could say, the person of our story, of all years. Was that the kind of person that most affected your life this past year? Someone who you never knew before and may have had no contact with since, but in that moment they changed the course of events? A doctor, a teacher, a caregiver, a social worker, an anonymous person, a taxi driver that pointed you in the right direction or kept you safe from harm. Was your personal person of the year a heroic person? A leader, a role model that may not even have known who you are, but their example, by their actions, they inspired you and shaped the direction of your year. A person like Moses, who led the Israelites from slavery to freedom, who freed a nation, but it was a nation made up of individuals, and we are commanded to view the event as though each one of us was personally freed by God through Moses from bondage. Was the person of your year the kind of person, that kind of person, a motivator, a personality bigger than life, but yet miraculously not so big that they did not have a strong impact on your own life this past year? Was your personal person of the year a wicked person, an arch enemy, a rival, who was successful in undercutting your dreams and your desires? Or did they fail and therefore served as the positive negative motivation that you needed to seek a new direction? A person like Haman, whose desire to destroy the Jewish people resulted in unifying and defining them. And lastly, was your personal person of the year a partner or a companion, a spouse, a colleague, a family member, a dear friend, someone who has been there all along, but this year they were really there for you? This year they stood out amongst all the others. This year they reminded you that what you never forgot, why you have trusted them and relied upon them so strongly for so long. Were they like Jethro was to Moses, Moses' father-in-law, who saw Moses working himself to death, caring for the people, and took him aside and gave him some sage advice, perhaps the first time in the history of the people, and maybe the only time, that a son-in-law listened to his father-in-law for advice. When he told him, Jethro did to Moses, to slow down, to share the responsibility, to not try to do it all, to not try to be all things to all people all the time. Were they like Adam and Eve, who had a falling out, a breach of trust, who, because of their closeness and their trust in each other, they caused the deepest pain, the most lasting hurt when their relationship fell apart. One fell and took the other down with them. Who was your personal person of the year? If I was brave and if we had time, I would ask you to all turn your chairs towards each other and we'd sit in a circle and we'd share. But the truth is, I don't really need to know who your personal person of the year was. But you do. You need to know. Each of us needs to. Maybe you don't like to look back to the past. Maybe you're more of a January 1st than a December 31st kind of person. But I would suggest, as a student and now I guess a teacher of history, a student and a teacher of Jewish history, that we can't know where we are going in this new year, unless, of course, we know where we have been. So let us resolve in all of our resolutions, in these last remaining days of 2016, to look back on our past, so that we can look forward to our future. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Amen. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.